It was the Buddha who said that existence is suffering until it isn't. That if you dive into any sensation and hold that deep dive long enough, it ultimately turns into joy.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this very special episode of Stay Grounded with Dr. Guru Singh. This was the most special episode for me to record because, one, not only is Guru Singh one of the most revered spiritual teachers of our time, a master of Kundalini Yoga with over 50 years of experience in conscious living and Eastern mysticism, but he is just such a playful soul. I had the privilege of recording this episode at his home in Los Angeles, and it was just such a treat to drop in with him and to get to experience his depth and his heart. Like you could, after the episode, I just felt so loved and so cherished and so grateful. And I'm just so excited for each of you to experience this brilliant conversation of how to actually harmonize the head, the heart, and the gut. I mean, in this conversation, we talked about so many different things, everything from how to actually reconnect us to our inner technology, how to engage with our emotions as friends rather than adversaries. What does it feel like to come home to our bodies and to embody and embrace the full human experience as opposed to numbing ourselves or running from it? The role of sound and mantras in stimulating our inner healing mechanisms, the importance of integrating all of our parts with ourselves, even the ones that we try to run from, and so much more. I mean, truly, Guru Singh is a master, a true spiritual master. And I just appreciate what I appreciate most about Guru Singh specifically is his ability to articulate these vast esoteric concepts into stories and use the depth of language to convey powerful, powerful teachings. And this conversation was one of my favorite I've recorded all year, and I'm really excited for each of you to enjoy the wisdom of Guru Singh, and I hope it uplifts you and inspires you to really lean into this human experience with more presence. And so, without further ado, here is the amazing Guru Singh. Enjoy. Guru Singh.
Hey.
It's so good to be here with you.
It's really great to know you. And I mean, we have interesting names, right? Guru Singh, Raj Jana. And they both have a ring to them that goes back in history of the similar portion of the planet. And getting to know you, I go, yeah, that's right. That's totally true. We have this common root.
Yeah, I just feel so grateful that we're here in your home on this couch that has been in your family for so long.
Yeah, over a century.
Yeah. And I just feel the depth and the richness of this moment. And so I just want to, again, thank you for opening up your heart and opening up your home for us to have this conversation. It means a lot to me.
My wife and I welcome you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I have a million things that I'd love to ask you, but
we can only do 100,000. In this time limit, we got only 100,000. Maybe a couple more, but
yes. And but if I tune in and really drop into what I think is most alive for me, is a curiosity around just this concept of spiritual bypass, and what I feel is alive right now in the space. Like there seems to be this desire to transcend the human experience as opposed to befriending it and really meeting all the layers of the human. And I'm curious if you have any perspectives or thoughts around why it is that we find it more desirable to leave than it is to meet the fullness of what's here.
Well, before we went live and you were invoking a deep prayer, a deep intention into this podcast, you said something that was very much in answer to what you were just communicating, or not in answer, but in response perhaps. And that is that we're going to travel, but there's no end, there's no destination, right? We're just going to be involved in the process. when we sit here. And that's very disruptive to a brain in the head, which is two-dimensional, that wants to be able to measure something, draw a conclusion, and then feel feelings about that conclusion. Because the head brain is two-dimensional. It's a computer. And computers are two-dimensional. They run on bits. It's either on or off. Computer programming is lining up a lot of signals of on, off, 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 on, off. And those create what the computer is going to achieve. And that's the same thing with the head brain. And over the last long time, I don't want to just put a number on it, but centuries, perhaps millennia, all the human culture has done is educate the head brain. And so the head brain now finds itself in a position that it doesn't comprehend. And like anything, whether it's a four-legger or a winged creature or a finned creature or a two-legged creature, any creature that can move, unlike a tree, when it is in something that is extremely unfamiliar, it feels extremely uncomfortable. It feels unsafe. And so the response is to, let's get out of here. And what is the response of let's get out of here, translated into spiritual talk, is let's transcend this circumstance. Let's fly above it. Let's not even be engaged in it. And it's been to such a degree that thank God somebody came up with the name bypassing, spiritual bypassing. And because there's nothing not alive about this fabric. There's nothing not alive about this microphone. Because every atom in all of these is in motion. And that motion is a living event. And so soul is in everything. What gathers soul is intention. This little chihuahua that loves you, by the way, is a gathering of soul that's all around it, right? You, me, everyone in this is gathering soul that's all around it. That soul wants to have a full experience inside the being. But if all we're doing is educating the head brain, which is two-dimensional, right, wrong, good, bad, yes, no, totally analytical, the heart brain is a timekeeper. It's the fourth dimension. The gut brain is a space nourisher, whether it's the food you eat or the people you meet or the places you go. That comes in through the gut brain. And modern medical science is calling it multi-braining or M-braining for short. That you have neurology here, neurology here, neurology in the head. But all we're doing is educating this. We're not educating the heart. We're not educating the gut. And so what we do is we have a world full of food that's not food, right? People are eating stuff that's ridiculous. It's made in a factory. We have relationships that are struggling because there's no heart center in it, right? But everything is being analyzed. Everything is being observed from this position up here. And that's why people want to get out of here, because there's this whole other mechanism inside of them that isn't feeling safe because it's not being included.
How do we restore safety, right? Because to me, that feels like the bridge back in, the bridge back into meeting life fully.
By podcasting.
Great. I'm on the right track.
Really. Because what is a podcast? It's a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a conversation that opens up people's awareness.
Mm.
And so many conversations are just head-brain conversations, which are two-dimensional. Is this person right or is this person wrong? Am I right or am I wrong? Should I do this? Should I do that? Those are not conversations. Those are kind of indications, an indication of who I am. This is who I am. And then you indicate who you are. And then I indicate back that I don't like what you are. And then you indicate back, well, go your own way then, right? And that's what's happening in the world because we're not educating the full system. So everybody wants out. It's just this, to go back to the original question, it's just the people that are spirit-based, soul-based, faith-based. They want out, but they gloss it over with I don't want out of here. I just want to be above here so I can see all that is here, rather than digging your roots into here and really being present.
Yeah. And, I just look at where we are as a society right now. Like we have so much illness and so much sickness. And I actually truly believe it's because we've been transcending this human experience. Like
in a big way.
Like we haven't been really truly sitting with the emotions. We haven't been acknowledging the pain. We're not leaning into our relationships as mirrors. I mean, all of these very real human things that we must do in order to have thriving lives, we're not. And we keep transcending it or going to a pill or trying to find the solution outside of us. But there seems to be this genuine resistance to coming back home and inhabiting home and being with the totality of home. And that's what brings, I have a lot of curiosity around, like when it's home, why are we running?
The moment you said that, made that statement, I just couldn't even stop this huge smile that was coming on my body. It wasn't just my mouth. Yeah. The moment that we capture the moment is when we recognize or know again that this is home and it's familiar, no matter where we are. It was the Buddha who said that existence is suffering until it isn't. That if you dive into any sensation and hold that deep dive long enough, it ultimately turns into joy. We have several layers to our being, our experiential being. We've got the physical layer, we've got the emotional layer, we've got the mental layer, and then we've got the subtle layers that go on for a lot of layers. We're not going to go through all of that in this moment, but we'll just call it spirit layers or soul layers, whatever. Every religion has a system of identifying the different layers. This is the body of this is the this of that, this is the that of this. And those are all truths in part. The base coat of physiology, for example, the walls in this room are fairly close to white. But the rug in this room has a gold sheen to it with a lot of flowers. Every one of those colors started out as white, base coat. And you go to a paint store and you notice that they start out with a bucket of white paint. And then they add these little drops of color, tint. And then they shake it all up, and it comes out this completely unique color. The base coat of all of that paint is that white. The base coat of the physical body is ease. Any distortion from ease is called dis-ease. The base coat of the emotional body is joy. Every other color of every other emotion is just a shift, a shape shifting of that joy. Every base coat of the mental body is knowing or knowledge. You know everything. I know everything. We don't recall all of it all of the time, but we know it at our base. And that's why when we suddenly discover something, discover means to uncover, to take away the cover. It's always been there. Same as recognition, to know it again. You recognize, oh, yeah. And so when you're talking about what's working in the world and what's not working in the world, and how this bypassing, whether it's spiritual bypassing, emotional bypassing, physical bypassing, mental bypass, whatever it is, whatever level it is at, is just the avoidance or the ignoring of. And another word for ignoring things is called ignorance. And so ignorance is not knowing. Ignorance is avoiding the fact that you know, or ignoring the fact that you know. And so if the base of our physical bodies is ease, then we have to come home. And that's why I got so turned on by you using that expression, coming home. When we come home to our bodies, and we're not just using the body like some vehicle that's carrying a head brain thinking around, right? And a stomach to feed it. But we actually come home to our body and we feel what our body's feeling. We come home to our emotions and we feel what our emotional body is feeling. And we come home to our mental body and we experience our thoughts and we allow our thoughts to communicate. Then if we do it often enough, our body settles down to become easeful. Our emotions settle down to become joyful. And our mental body settles down to become mindful or knowing. And that's when we can sit in a moment and not bypass it, but experience it fully. And not take it as a condemnation. I didn't want to use the expression not take it personally. Actually, take it extremely personally. Because it is you about you.
It's self-love.
It is.
It's the deepest form of intimacy.
And think about love. Plants grow in the earth. They set their roots into the earth. Animals, regardless of if they're two-leg or four-leg or winged or finned, animals put their roots in love. Love is the earth of the animal world. And it travels with us. It surrounds us. It moves with us, just like as if plants are moving. Well, plants are moving because the earth is spinning.
Yeah. When I look back on my own journey, like the moments where I felt the most love are the moments where I allow myself to crack. where I allow myself to feel, where I allow myself to be in the discomfort, where I allow myself to be held, where I allow myself to scream, when I allow myself to be human, that's when I feel that it's like there's a depth of that that's just so palpable, and we're so afraid to actually experience it. Why are curious? Just one, fear. Why? And then the second piece is courage. Where from?
My whole life has been to dissect, to investigate, to research, right? To search again. The heart has 3 levels. The lower portion of the heart is the hope heart. The middle portion of the heart is the willful heart, the willing heart. When you don't have hope, you won't have willingness. You won't be willing. If there's no hope, you will not be willing. The heart is about action in time. Heartbeat keeps the body alive. The first organ to be created, the last organ to pass. So that heart has to see hope in order to have will. You know, when somebody wins something and they come from way behind, they put their heart into it. They willed it, right? That's hard will.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to do that, they had to give themselves enough hope, which they might have done through, talking to themselves, through going through pain or whatever, going through a lot of practice, whatever it is. The top third of the heart is what the French call cœur. That's the cœur in French is heart. Courage âge means time. Time of the heart is courage. So you have hope, so you're willing to take action. Once you take action, there's got to be a reaction, third law of motion. Somebody's not going to like your action. Einstein put out all of his theories before he was 25 years old. He spent the whole rest of his life defending them. Takes courage. So you have hope, then you take action, then you have reaction, then you have to have the courage to be able to stand in place in the midst of the reaction. And all of us, people shrink inside themselves to not take action, to not be outstanding, to not stand out, to not be understanding, to not stand under, to not do any of these things except just carry myself, just get enough of that capital so that I can pay for what I'm expensing. Just get enough of that capital to pay for what I'm expensing. And life has become a head-brain order of a 2-dimensional world that exists within 3 dimensions of space and the 4th dimension of time, with all of the answers sitting in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and so on dimensions. And so what we end up with here is we end up with life in a very limited form, whereas, in fact, as humans, we are actually limitless. And there is nothing. We can walk on water. You'd have to practice it. We can fly in the air. You'd have to practice it. We can do anything that the great mythologies have said was done. The mythologies of all the religions, the mythologies of all the philosophies talk about all of these great feats that could be perhaps done. The flying carpets of Persia, the incredible water walkers of the Kanchenjunga mountains of the Himalayas. All of this documented by travelers throughout the ages, turned into mythologies because people stopped believing in it.
Mm-hmm.
This is the level of coming home that allows us to truly be human. Hu means light, and man means right now. So human means the one who brings light right now, a human being.
I love how conscious you are to etymology. Something I've been really picking up in our dialogues, and how mindful you are of the words.
Well, you and I are both man, right? We're called a man, pronounced man in Sanskrit. Then there's my wife. She's a womb man. Womb means future. Man means now. You and I can take care of now, but a woman is now with the future inside of her.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about when in modern spirituality they talk about engaging your feminine qualities, engage your womb, engage the future. That's why they call it woman's intuition, because that's what the future is. It's the intuition, right? The womb. The womb carries all of the seeds of the future. And seeds are infinite. Every seed has every generation of seeds programmed into it that are going to go on forever. So when we are sitting wanting to transcend and to avoid and to ignore and to bypass, in fact, that's the exact opposite of what we want to do. We want to engage, right? What does engage means? It means to dive into the measurement, gauge. Language, measure the length or depth. We're having we're having a cross-language communication, right? You listen to my words, I listen to your words. They register in our psyche, they register in our whole being. If we can respond with our whole being, then we come to a realization. If we only respond from here, we come to an analysis.
Guru Singh, I have a question, I'm just going to trust it. Why are we so afraid of death when it's the only thing that's guaranteed?
Because we think we're not still alive when we're dead. We think that we lose life. We don't lose life. We just drop the rental body. You know, you drop off your car at Hertz or at Avis or whatever, and you don't cry. You step out of the car. The car stays there. We step out of the body stays on planet Earth. Earth dissolves it. They either burn it or they put it in the ground and it disintegrates, right? Yeah. But the one thing that's the biggest surprise about death is that it just doesn't change anything except your rental car.
There's a part of me that feels like a lot of the dysregulation we're experiencing as a society is because we are not in right relationship to that. Mm-hmm. We've either forgotten or been conditioned to believe something else, which then puts this pressure on us to be, perform, or act a certain way, and that then contributes to illness of many forms. How do you feel like emotions, spirituality, these addressing the heart brain, the gut brain, how does that actually impact physical health?
Connection is what circulates energy. You connect with a person, the relation, the relation is circulating. Circulation, relation, right? And that's a circulation of energy. It can be physical energy, it can be emotional energy, it can be mental energy, it can be spiritual energy, but it's a circulation in a good relation. When we relate with our whole being, and we don't run from any part of it, We dive deep into the physiology. We dive deep into the emotions. We dive deep into the mental projections and mental thoughts. Then all of a sudden, like you and I sitting here on this couch, we have a real relationship, a real communication. The same thing is taking place inside of each one of us. And the only one on this couch that is doing it more than any others of us on this couch is this little four-legger. And that's why we love to be around two things in life. We love to be around little tiny children because they haven't yet learned how to escape their bodies. They're fully engaged in their bodies. And we love to be around dogs, cats, horses, goats, all of the animals, because they too have not been schooled to escape their bodies, to escape their emotions, or to think that they're having bad thoughts. They're just having thoughts. Right, wrong, good, bad is just a two-dimensional opinion. Yeah. And so when we engage our physical body on a daily basis in a full nature of what it's meant to be an experiential process, casting out frequencies that then get absorbed through the various mechanisms within us as emotions, as thoughts, as physiology, whatever it is. All of a sudden, we're fully engaged in the experience of life. When we're not fully engaged in the experience of life, when we're not in full communication, that's when things start to wither. It's like not watering a plant. If you're not fully engaged in the cycle of a plant's needs, the plant will wither. When the physical body withers, it becomes diseased because it no longer has that state of ease. And this is going to prove that the metaphysicians of the millennia knew what they were talking about, because the physicians of the modern world will be creating all of the instrumentation that can measure what the metaphysicians throughout the millennia have known through their intuitive knowing. As I said earlier, we know everything. I look at it this way. If you see a beautiful diamond or a beautiful piece of shiny metal, that crystal nature, or a quartz crystal, that crystal nature is in there. It's inside. That shine on the metal is inside. To get it to shine, you take away that which is covering it. You discover the shine. And the same thing holds true for you and I, and for everyone else as a human being or as an animal that is listening to this. You want to uncover, you want to discover the shine that is inside of you, because your body is shiny, your emotions are shiny, your mental being is shiny, your spirit is shiny. And if you get in and you do the work of engaging, not bypassing, that's when you're going to be able to really, really understand. And by the way, all of these, and I don't want to leave anyone out. Okay, people who have experienced trauma, a lot of women out there have experienced trauma, sexual trauma, aggressive trauma. A lot of men have experienced bullying, trauma. Maybe they've even gone to war, which is the most traumatic experience.
And even if you didn't experience trauma, if it was experienced in your lineage, it's passed down. So I would argue everybody
epigenetically.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that in. Yeah, generations. Medical science has traced it through, in the Genome Project, they traced it through 14 generations, which exactly replicates the indigenous people throughout the world of talking about the Sacred Mother and the 13 grandmothers. That's 14 generations of epigenetic influence. So if one of your ancestors was raped, or one of your ancestors was caught in war, or one of your ancestors was whatever, you're feeling it through the DNA, through the epigenetics of your DNA, which medical science thought was, they called it junk DNA when they first discovered it. It's 90% of the DNA is holding the ancestral signals, 90% of our DNA. And then they started calling it plastic DNA. This is doctors' talk. And then now all of a sudden they've defined it as epigenetics. In other words, what we experience deeply in life gets imprinted into DNA and passed on through generations. So what you're talking about from the very opening statement of transcending and bypassing to a very recent statement of how does the emotional body help in healing the physical body, all of these are, it's important to coalesce all of these bodies, individual bodies, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or subtle, and bring them all into harmony so that we can solve, because they will self-solve. They're very intelligent. That's what coming home is all about, self-solving. The moment you feel familiar, you feel safe. The moment you feel at home, you feel safe. And when you feel safe, it's what I wanted to say when you were asking about love. When we feel safe, we become vulnerable. When we become vulnerable, we experience love. And that's what I experienced with my wife. When I first saw the picture of what was said to be, okay, there's your wife, I felt safe. And so in that vulnerability of feeling safe, my body and all of my programming set up so that I would end up walking for 9 months through time and space to suddenly sitting down next to her and meeting her physically for the first time.
Guru Singh, if you had to close your eyes and just drop in, what does feeling safe actually feel like?
Scary as heck. Because feeling safe drops all your defenses and takes you out of the fear-based sympathetic nervous system and puts you into the trust-based parasympathetic nervous system. And in that trust-based parasympathetic nervous system, you got no defenses. So you feel totally freaked out. And that's where you have to sit and hold the space. You have to sit and just hold that freak out until it stops. And that's what the Buddha was saying. When you sit in anything long enough, it turns to joy.
And what I've found for myself is if I'm having a hard time sitting with another person, to just hold me and just see me and love me in my scared state has been one of the most healing aspects of life. I used to think that this whole healing journey was a solo journey and that I had to do all the things on my own. And then I realized that was also hyper independence, was in some forms a trauma response of me not trusting people outside of me or trusting others. And then my medicine became leaning in and allowing myself to be seen in my mess, allowing myself to say the wrong thing, allowing myself to be a scared animal and ask and be held in that. Even sometimes shake, sometimes scream, sometimes let my body do what it's doing and not try to judge it or shame it or condemn it or tell it needs to be any way. And I think we've lost touch with the very animalistic nature of being human, right? We have these perceptions of who we're supposed to be or these ideas of what we are supposed to look like. But I'm curious if you have any perspectives around the true nature of what it means to heal.
Well, you just described it really well. To sit with it, to lean in. I love your word. You've used that several times in our meeting here today, in our first meeting of many meetings that we've had in the past that aren't cognizant of, right? And that's where the emphasis of transhumanism is coming into play, whereby There must be something outside of me to fix the inside of me. And the actual truth is reversed. There's nothing that we've put on the outside, including a microphone, including a camera, including lights, that aren't inside of us. Everything that we've invented outside of us is something that exists inside of ourselves, even the wheel. In the capillaries, here's a crazy piece of data. A human being has 60,000 miles of capillaries inside their body. That's twice around the equator plus 10,000 miles left over. 60,000 miles of capillaries. That means those capillaries have to be so minute that only one blood cell can go through there at a time, right? They all line up and they're like little wheels and they roll through the capillaries like little wheels. We replaced telepathy with telephony. The Aboriginals in their original state could cast their thoughts hundreds of miles at great distance and come up with conversations with people that weren't present in the three-dimensional space. They do it through rhythm. They do it through melody. They do it through harmony. The whales send their voices thousands of miles through the water. And an offspring 1,000 miles from its mother will recognize its mother's voice with all of the other sounds that are happening in the oceans. It'll be able to pick out of that incredible malaise of sound, the sound of its mother calling. What we have done is we have educated from the head brain's perspective and built this whole world of technology. I'm not an anti-technologist, but I am saying that you must put as much energy into the technology that's within you as you do into the technology that is outside of you. Because if you ignore the technology that's within you, it's going to wither and it's going to become diseased. And so as we think of transhuman, as people think, oh, I could replace this, I could replace it, I could add this, I could do this, what's going to be happening on the inside is that the fundamental structure of life is going to wither, and there'll be just a bunch of atoms on the outside being in a non-directive way. And that's a future that people like you and I and others that we know are striving to avoid. We're trying to re-engage life rather than to disengage life. We're trying to put importance into life rather than importance into that which is outside of life. You know, capital has only been the driving force for, 300, 400, 500 years. Since the world in Europe became round and the Northern Europeans decided they were going to colonize and merchandise the world. That's when capital became this medium of exchange. And I'm not an anti-capitalist person, but I'm saying that if we make capital the most important thing, which it is right now in many instances, that what ends up happening is those things that are very real become ignored and they begin to wither and they begin to die, like family unity, like community unity, like neighborhood unity, like the unity between the genders, the unity between all different kinds of people. I mean, look at you. You're a person of color and they call me a white man. That's not white. That's more white. That's closer to white. That's kind of like I'm a pink man or I'm kind of a polka dotted guy, right? Our paint job, like we distinguish people according to their paint job. It's like walking down the street and say, I don't like blue cars. the ridiculous nature of this analytical head brain being the boss in charge has overtaken everything in the world. And it's separated us from our physiology. And now it's trying to fix it within itself and come up with ideas within itself, which aren't going to be a fix.
You can't solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it.
If you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to keep getting what you always got, right?
Yeah, I'm curious, when you talk about the inner technology, how does one maximize the inner technology in a modern world? You know, you're a devout practitioner and teacher of Kundalini, and so I'm curious how you bridge these ancient practices with modern. Like, how do you meet the modern world in the ways that can allow us to access the depth necessary to truly thrive?
Yeah, the through string, or the through line, the thread that's gone through every century and millennia for life is breath. So the first thing we teach at Kundalini University, and in all of the other classes that we teach, is how to breathe properly, right? So we have a paradoxical breath that happens from birth. And paradoxical breathing is raise the shoulders up like this, because that's the first breath that we took, because that was the breath that needed to engage the lungs when we came out of the womb. It's called paradoxical breath. The real breath that you have to get into, once the fear of coming out of the womb and being engaged in a three-dimensional space, because you were engaged in multi-dimensional space inside the womb. I mean, you were floating in space. You were floating in the cosmos inside the womb. And now suddenly you have to breathe for yourself. You have to find food for yourself. You know, it's all on you. And that's why we go back to that original state of going solo, you said earlier, you know, because we kind of go back as far as we can. We were alone. And oftentimes people are very much alone. That's why when we give birth to children, we give birth in a very safe environment, and the baby never separates from the mother for hours. You know, the baby is right there, you know, and it doesn't feel alone. It's not taken and put on a scale and, you know, clean out the nose, clean out the throat, do all this stuff. The baby just has no idea who it is at that moment. So when you have this sensation of breath that goes all the way back to that first moment, and you start breathing in a not a paradoxical breath, but in a proper breath, you push the belly out as you inhale, drop the shoulders down, and that starts to utilize the lower 1/3 of your lungs. And that's the same thing that happened 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, 500,000 years ago, and yesterday. And so all of a sudden, you're breathing this belly breath, right? Which is dropping the breath into the lower 1/3 of your lungs, which is rarely used by people that are in high tension jobs, right? They're breathing up here, shallow, and that's why they have anxiety attacks, because anxiety attack basically comes from the solar plexus right there at the lower 1/3 of your lungs, screaming for attention. Me, come here, come here, come to this point here, pay attention. And the anxiety just becomes gut-wrenching because it twirls, and you can't breathe because all of a sudden that twirl grabs hold of the myofascial network in the body, and it just pulls it all down and starts to choke off the throat. I mean, people that have real bad panic attacks, you know, because they're disconnected. And what do they need? The same thing they needed 10,000 years ago. Breathe properly. Begin to push the belly out on your inhale intentionally. Draw it back in on the exhale. Push it out, and all of a sudden you start opening up the alveoli sacs in the lower 1/3 of your lungs, and your brain oxygenates. And suddenly your brain goes, wow, I never thought of that before. Wow, that's another good idea. Because another thing that is happening is that as you belly breathe, all of a sudden the emotions begin to have and create ideas. Because the ideas, notions come from emotions. Right? Just remember that little ditty. But your ideas come out of the gut brain, which is sitting on top of your pelvis. And your pelvis is where you were conceived. Inside the pelvis of your mother is where you were conceived. It's a bowl that holds all of these glands and organs that are both sexual, digestive, circuit. All of that is happening right there in this area. And that's developing the peptides and hormones, lipids and proteins that are pushed into your bloodstream, and then registers through the hypothalamus in your brain, which then registers to the pituitary and the pineal to reconstruct the physical activity so that it can accommodate what's taking place in your body. But if you don't start it, if you don't originate it right here, then it's going to become this whole head trip that's totally disconnected and has no relevance, no realization, no reality in what's taking place in the moment. So how do I translate ancient teachings into modern technology? Go to the basics. Breath, posture, movement, sound. Breath, posture, movement, sound. And we call it, breath work. Posture we call acuposture. You put your body in a particular position, you hold it there beyond your comfort zone, and all of a sudden it releases its concept of pain, and the comfort zone is no longer limited. We call the motion, we call it biometric movement. You put your body through movement, slow movement, rhythmical movement, so that you're not just moving your body to get stuff done. You're moving your body to move your body so that the body feels at home within itself. That's what the word orthopedic means. Ortho means structure. Pedic means infant, like a pediatric. So orthopedic means put your structure back the way it was when you were an infant, right? When it was healthy, when it was not abused and misused. So all of your cartilage was properly shaped. And what you can do through this biometric movement, which we do in Kundalini, in the yoga, is that you do slow motion in a fashion that you're moving your body in ways that it doesn't normally move when you're walking to get something done, when you're reaching to grab something, when you're working on all of these various things. And most people end up with a set form of motion, so they start to wear the cartilage in their shoulders and their knees and their hips and all of the different joints. They start wearing it out because they only do certain motions, right? Same motion, same motion, same motion. So what biometric movement does is it starts to develop other motions, which start to mold the cartilage back into its more pedic form, its more original form, so that we end up having this body that is able to move and not be stiff and not grow old. I mean, it's going to age, but so quickly. I mean, can you consider 60, 70 years to be a lifestyle and a life cycle? These bodies can live 100, 120, 130, 140 years.
I see it in you. I can feel the true life force that you're carrying and embodying, and it shows. I mean, like, you have such a youthful vibrancy to the way that you move, and it's palpable. And
My mother was asked when she was 98, "What's it feel like to be 98?" She says, "Kind of like 18."
I'm actually just really curious about, I hear all the breath and the movement of the body and the posture. And what was the fourth one?
Sound.
And I'm curious if you could speak to your relationship to your emotions, and like, how has your relationship to feeling and being in your emotional body actually aided your life force, and how has it created life? And would you even be open to sharing moments where it's been difficult to feel, and how you and how did you move through that? Because when I think about the world and where we are, like, it's one thing to feel our feelings when things are great, but it's in those tough moments, those crisis moments, when we're dealt with an emotion or something that shows up and we don't allow ourselves to experience it, that it then gets stored and it then manifests. And so I'm curious if you could share an example or a story of when it was hard for you, and what did you do in that moment when it was hard?
I had to learn in that moment. And learning is comprised of a lot of failure. You don't learn straight away. You learn by failing, by making mistakes, by being quick to apologize, and also quick to forgive. And so in moments of distress, in moments of pain, in moments of death, you will not always do the right thing. When I was 20 years old, I died in a hospital from peritonitis and sepsis that set in after a ruptured appendix. And I was dead for a minute and 45 seconds. And I had a lot of experiences during that minute and 45 seconds that had nothing to do with a minute and 45 seconds. It had to do with a long-ass period of time, right? Because there's no time beyond the sensory system that sort of controls the interpretation of things as time passing, right? And what that taught me was what everything taught me, is that you're not going to be prepared. Things are going to go really badly. Stick with it. Because everything has a cycle, a life cycle, and when things are going really badly, stick with it. Because it will have a life cycle, and then it'll come back to a rest point. And that's when you can gather yourself back together again. And my wife and I have been married for 48 years. And, you know, not every one of those minutes has been an ecstatic minute. There have been minutes gathered into hours, gathered into days, gathered into weeks, in which I remember one time she came up to me and she says, "You know, Guru Singh," she says, "I love you and I know I love you, but right now I don't like you." And I thought, wow, that's really truthful. And so then I sat with that, because somebody had just told me that I wasn't at that moment, in their perspective, likable. So I had to look at it through their eyes. I had to feel it through their feelings. And if we can do that, if when we're told that we're hard to this and hard to that and not this and not that, if we can sit with those perspectives, because they're perspective of ourself reflecting off of another life form, then we can get in touch with that part of us that is what we call in music a jazz chord, like a passing chord, something that creates a disharmonic nature in order to resolve, because then you so much more appreciate the resolution. That's why jazz is so stimulating, because it's hitting a lot of these intervals, these harmonic intervals, which are very stressful to the ear, like sixths and ninths, harmonic sixths and harmonic ninths, and intervals that are actually that create stress in the ear and stress in the body. That's why the gong is so powerful, because the gong plays all of the intervals all of the time. And you're getting the great intervals, and the greatest interval is the fifth, right? It's what Pythagoras and Plato called the most healing of all intervals. But the gong plays every interval and all the overtones, and that's why the gong experience is such an overwhelming experience, because pretty much what the gong does to you is that it gives you so much stimulation at the level of sound that your auditory system just gives up and says, I'm done. I'm going to stop making analytical judgments of what's going on, and I'm just going to absorb. And that's kind of what you have to do in those moments in which you're told that you're a jerk, in which you're told that you're not likable. You just have to sit with that and be deep in it, not rise above it, right? Not bypass it, not transcend it, but just sink into it and let it tell you its story. So back to your original point, what is my relationship with my feelings? They are my friends. My emotions are my friends. And what I oftentimes do in my meditative state is I'll have counsel. I'll hold counsel with my friends. So I'll line up my various emotions around a circle, like around a campfire, an imaginary campfire, or a real campfire, if I will. If I had the place, and I'll just sit around and I'll let them talk to me.
I'm laughing because it's what I do too.
Well, that's so sweet.
It's like my daily practice. Every morning I wake up, I brush my teeth, I sit down, and I have an hour-long meditation practice. And in that practice, I literally I let all my friends show up.
Yeah.
And it's just a big party with all of me.
Yeah, and in many mornings that you get up and you wake up, you feel terrible. I don't mean that you physically feel terrible. I mean that you emotionally feel terrible. And the terrible is just a general statement. Yeah. What is that terrible made up of? Oh, there's 2 parts joy, 5 parts frustration, 3 parts love, 6 parts fear, 4 parts total annihilation, everything's coming to an end, 3 parts the unknown, 2 parts certainty, on and on and on. And they all mix together into the worst meal that you've ever eaten. Somebody said, well, we're going to have salad, and we're going to have soup, and we're going to have dessert, and we're going to have entree. And that's all going to be mixed up in our stomach. So let's mix it up here and put a bowl in front of everybody that has soup mixed with salad, mixed with entree, mixed with dessert. There it is. Yuck. No distinction. No separation. When your fear can just have a heart-to-heart with you, right? It's a good conversation, because sometimes there's a reason to be afraid. Like, go sightseeing on a tall mountain, don't jump off the trail. Yeah. Driving down a highway, don't cross the center line. There's reason for jealousy. Jealousy is one of the greatest growth stimulants areas. You see somebody that you're jealous of, that means they've done something, have something, are something that the deep part inside of you wants to be, have, or contain.
Yeah. Well, I just one, I love you.
That's a recognition. I love you as well.
It's just I'm so grateful for your playful spirit. your true playful approach to this human experience, because I think that's also a big part of why we suffer. We forget that we have the choice to play and to
Well, I
view.
want you to tell that to my apprehensive self that sometimes comes along, right? I'm playing with you, but I'm really serious too, because to hear those words come back to my apprehensive self says, oh, I can relax. Because all of us have an apprehensive self, have a calming self, have a transcendent self, have an avoidant self, have an engaging self. We all have all the parts.
Well, I think that's what's so in even kind of bringing this conversation into a beautiful recognition is like we've danced around in so many ways around the transcending and the befriending, and it what feels like is even using the ancient technologies and everything is about bringing us back into an integrated way of allowing all of our parts to be here and to maximizing the potential of this vessel that we were born with. It isn't about running from the body. Yeah. It's about being here fully and actually being with all the parts of us.
That's why
fully.
we're called a human being.
Totally. And that to me is like... And
what you just described, by the way, is you'll want to capture what you just said at whatever minute in this we are at, because that's a clip that you're going to want a lot of people to witness. The relational being friends with the avoidant self, the engagement being in relationship with the fearful self, all of these various parts of our being, which are all part of our being.
Yeah, there are no bad parts.
No bad parts, no bad moments, just mistakes. You know, what do they say in film, right? When you're filming, cut, that was a mistake. Let's take it again. A mistake gets taken again. That's life.
Guru Singh, I'm so infinitely grateful for just the candidness and the presence and the beauty with which you articulate and the range with which you can play at everything from the wildly esoteric to coming back into the true lived reality of what it means to be human. I feel infinitely grateful that I've had a chance to just drop in with you over chai with your pup hanging out right here in your beautiful home on your family couch. I feel truly honored and so touched to be sharing these moments with you. So thank you.
I want to remind you of geography. Costa Rica, Boulder, Colorado, Los Angeles, or Seattle.
They're lines.
So when you're in travel, I'm in the path. If you swing the path wide,
If I take the scenic route.
Take the scenic route, so that we can do this often.
Yeah, no, I'm, we share a mutual brother, and Michael, and I'm just so infinitely grateful for him and for all of the impact that you've had on his life and him on my life. It's this beautiful, and I'm grateful that now we're friends.
And I just want to say something. You can use this or not, but in today's world, there's a lot of wonderful exposure. And it's happening because every bit of technology that is outside of ourselves has replicated something inside of ourselves that is what you've used a word very often, and I love the word, curious. You often say, I'm curious, right? When we were talking. And so I look at the curious portion of technology as being able to expose both the brilliance of life and also the not so brilliant parts of life, which is the same thing that we have to go through when we're working with our emotional body, is that we have the joyful parts of our, the joyful, loving parts of our emotion, and we have the fearful, doubtful, concerned, all those frustrated parts of our emotional body. And, so when people see me on camera, they're going to go, oh, that's Guru Singh, he's in Kundalini, and Kundalini has, over the past 5-7 years, had some crazy stories, right, about how it transitioned through from 1969 until, the present day. And some of those stories are wonderful, and some of those stories are awful. And there are some people who, like myself, were able to work in the arena and literally be able to gather the gemstones of the teachings and connect those gemstones back through history so that they're not just stagnant in a single moment or just the property of a single person, but that they're historical rivers of knowledge and wisdom, right? I was able to do that while navigating all of the other things that might have been going on that I didn't care to acknowledge or didn't care to observe because they were going on behind closed doors and going on, with no outlet of information. So just for all the people that are maybe watching this and going, okay, well, how can he be looking like that and sounding like that and acting like that when there's all this other stuff in the background? And I'm just here to say that I acknowledge now that I'm aware of all that other stuff that's gone on in the background. I acknowledge the pain that it has produced. And I am in total respect for the people that are in deep trauma because of that pain. And that every 24 hours has a dark portion and a light portion. And the polarity of equals and opposites is something that has to take place throughout the physical life. And so you can use this or not, but I'm just saying quite publicly that I am aware of the darkness that is always around things that are quite brilliant. And so I'm putting it in there, and do what you want with it.
Guru Singh, I have one last question for you. In the midst of everything you're doing, everywhere you've been and everywhere you're going, what is one thing you've done every single day to become a more grounded human being?
Physically, take off my shoes and stand on the earth for at least 10 minutes. Secondly, after I've come up off that, I get onto my mat and I make my body work like it did when I was 20. Because when I stand up off that mat, I don't want to be almost 80, because I'm 79. And the normal for 79, almost 80, is different than who I think that is. Like my mom said, at 98, I'm just 18. And so every day, I make sure that my body can move in the ways that it has been able to move. I make sure that I exercise. I make sure that I stretch. I make sure that I breathe. I make sure that I ground on the planet Earth. And I stay out of airplanes as much as I possibly can. My wife and I were flying 2 weeks out of every month for 25 years or more. And when the pandemic hit and we came out of the air, I went, what was that? What was that all about?
Oh man, so profound and so simple.
Yeah.
And
My grandfather said, never flew. I mean, he was born in the 1800s, right? My grandfather said that he would be very willing to fly, but he would have to keep one foot on the ground.
whole other kind of flight.
He was a great wisdom keeper. Yeah.
Guru Singh, thank you again for sharing your heart and just this time. I'm very, 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 very excited and grateful that we get to do this. Everybody, that's a wrap for this week's episode of Stay Grounded. I'm your host, Raj. This is your new friend, Guru Singh. And from us, stay grounded.
Stay grounded. Breathe. Be at peace.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Stay Grounded. No matter where you're from or what you're going through, I hope it helps you remember just how incredible you are and have always been. If you're on a path of emotional healing or self-discovery and would like to learn how Liberate can support your journey, head to www.rajjana.com/liberate, that is LIBER8, to learn more about our current group programs and one-on-one offerings. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.